Hey everyone, welcome to episode 8 of Heroic Nonsense. Today we'll be checking out the Junkion Arms Dealer and Mercenary Detritus from the Legacy Evolution line, a cool bot I picked up this past week when I saw him at the store. I wasn't sure I wanted to get him for our collection at first, but he looked too cool to pass up, especially given his more accurate Earth mode Jeep and coloring, as well as his backstory with his double allegiance to the Autobots and Decepticons, depending on who pays more and who is likely to win. As is now custom, we'll start with a few images of Detritus that I have reproduced from different Transformer sources. See if you can name the 3 and put your guesses in the comment section below. I'll give you guys a hint, one is a wild card. Now let's jump right into the box review. For some reason, beige military vehicles and figures always grab my attention, so the mix of the figure in the box art with that nice big purple Decepticon symbol on the front hood against a darker background definitely grabbed mine this time. You'll also notice that next to his name there are both an Autobot and Decepticon symbol, which I thought was a nice little touch. The side art also looks really nice with Detritus in an action pose and close-up of his face, and back image is generally what you'd expect from this line with accurate pictures of both his bot and Jeep modes. Now on to the figure itself. What can I say? I like this guy. Yes, he doesn't have as much contrasting colors as some of the other recent figures, but the beige and brown with hints of gold complement each other nicely, and for me represent a Desert Army Jeep quite well. I almost wish he had a Decepticon symbol on his arm as well, but makes sense to have an Autobot one thrown in there. I could easily see this figure used to swindle from the Combaticons. His face is very G1 Hound, even more so than our War for Cybertron version, which I like a lot on this guy. Couple of nice accents on his face and arms wraps this spot up nicely. If you're wondering about empty spaces, yes, this guy has some bigger chunks on his legs and a bit in his arms, but not the end of the world. His legs from behind actually don't look too bad with the gaps, perhaps because of the shadows that fill in the space. As for his Evo Fusion gimmick, his shoulder-mounted missile launcher can become a separate laser, with the shell attaching to his shoulder to give him a bit more detailing. You can also connect the two lasers together and get a nice big one that can be used for some cool poses. Finally, he is very posable so that you can place him into some great action shots. He bounces quite well when he is bending down on one knee and can even balance in a running pose. Where he lacks a bit of movement are in his arms given the size of his hood and chest area, which makes holding his combined laser a bit difficult. Now let's transform this guy and see his Jeep mode. And hope you like that sneak peek. More later. For a retool of War for Cybertron Hound, I think the designers did a pretty good job in making this look like a Jeep from Earth. I'd say overall he gets away with it, except for maybe the door areas and front seats. I like the window and hood section and the new more Earth-like tires he was given. A bit of empty spaces in the back, but guessing the designers had to make some compromises somewhere from the original version. 360 view so you can get the entire feel. Let's transform this guy. He is actually pretty straightforward and easier in my opinion than War for Cybertron Hound. We'll start with pushing back his shoulders slightly, and then we'll lift up his hood 90 degrees, which ends up hiding his head. Click down his back plate into the hood and tab into the windshield like so. Now we'll take his shoulders from before and push them back in, but all the way into the hood cavity, turning his arms 90 degrees so that they can bend in a bit for the wheel clearance. Like Hound, the inner part of the leg opens up until it is lined up 180 degrees with the outside part of the leg. Then all you have to do is rotate it back and then click the front tab into place with the side of the hood. It might take a little bit of work, it's a little finicky. Finally, push down his foot to form the side of the Jeep. Do the exact same thing for the other leg. Here I'm showing it from the other side. Rotate it back and click into place. I like to click this back part of the Jeep together at this point rather than earlier. And there you have it, Detritus, transformed into his Jeep form. Just add on each of the lasers to the holes on each side of the back of the Jeep. Don't forget to tab in these arms into the undercarriage so it stays in place nice and tight. We're getting close to the end, so let's look at some other Transformers from various lines for size and scale comparisons. Next to his mold brother, War for Cybertron Hound, you can see the similarities but also the retooling that has taken place to make Detritus unique. Hound definitely looks bulkier and more detailed, but the difference makes you feel like you actually have two different figures and not a simple repaint. You can see what I was talking about earlier with respect to the differences in their heads, and the more G1 toy accurate version of Detritus. To get an idea of scale, here he is next to Legacy Motor Master, which I thought looked good displayed with him. When I first thought of what other bots could look good with Detritus, these two came to mind. Runamuck and Runabout are still some of my favorite figures from the more recent lines, and felt they just worked well next to Detritus. Let me know if you agree in the comments. I finally got to pull out one of my original G1 toys, so you could also see the big difference in size from the G1 version of Hound, which used the same mold as G1 Detritus, and the recent iteration. Back to War for Cybertron Hound. These two look great together in this mode, and you can see the retooling a lot more here when transformed into their Jeep forms. I can't decide which I like better. They both have their benefits, and I guess it depends if you're going for a more Cybertronian or Earth-based aesthetic in your displays. So in my last episode, I mentioned that I like things to scale as much as possible. Opposite to the recent Inferno toy, which I spoke about last video, I find Detritus to be a bit too big next to the vehicle modes of some other Transformers. I didn't compare him here to Optimus, which I found to be way out of scale in this case, or Inferno, which is even more so, but I did put him next to Earth Mode Barricade so you could see a bit of the scaling issue. He starts scaling a bit better with Earthrise Trailbreaker, but still a bit off, I'd say. Adding him next to Ironhide, he looks fine as well. If scale was really bugging you, you can imagine him as a bigger type of Jeep and not the typical Vietnam era one, which is what he essentially is, and which was a lot smaller when compared to modern Jeep. Back to Runamuck and Runabout, I find he looks best, perhaps because of the wider bodies of the cars and the 80s feel. To end this section, G1 Hound next to Detritus. Funny how the Jeeps scale a bit better here when compared to the robot forms we looked at earlier. As we close out this episode, we get to do it with my favorite part, different ideas I have for displays based on what I think looks good together, either aesthetically or story-wise, or both. Here he is next to Generation Select Sandstorm. He was actually the very first Decepticon I thought of when I bought Detritus. In my head, I thought the beige colors would match up a bit better, but they do still look pretty good together, and I like the idea of these two desert military bots fighting alongside each other. Since Detritus is a mercenary, he can of course join the Autobots as well. I like the idea of Hound and Trailbreaker being part of this heavy artillery team of Jeeps, and I feel they actually do look really cool together. Hound and Detritus for sure look like they could cause some serious damage together. Back to the Decepticons, a few different shots of these guys together. Looking straight on, they actually do look like they scale quite nicely together. Really, any excuse for me to pull out Runamuck and Runabout. Now, I don't think I'd necessarily place these guys in a display together, but story-wise, it makes sense. You have Exhaust, which is a mercenary as well, and Punch, Counterpunch, who is a spy and can either be an Autobot or a Decepticon. If you're making up any stories for whatever reason, I'd say this team is the way to go. For my last two display ideas, I am showcasing my two favorite team-ups. I didn't think of this one at first, but I think Detritus works perfectly scale-wise with Legacy Evolution Beachcomber, especially in vehicle mode. I remember I had the same thought about Beachcomber being a bit too big for the other cars, but put these two together and man do they look good. And they both like sand. As for my last idea, I only thought about placing him with Legacy Evolution Blitzwing towards the end of taking these pictures for this episode. Their colors are a bit off, but not as much as with Sandstorm, and they are actually a lot closer in tone. I don't know what it is about these two together, but I feel like they could make such an awesome team and would probably enjoy working together. I almost see Blitzwing as Detritus' big brother, watching out for him in battles and guiding him along the way. They even look good in vehicle modes, at least when using Blitzwing in his tank form. Putting them all together, you have quite a nice display of some desert military cons taking on the Autobots camouflaged in the Sahara as they steal some Energon for Megatron. So that's it for this episode. I had way more fun than I thought I would, and didn't think I'd have this much content for Detritus. Hope you enjoyed this one as much as I enjoyed making it and sparked some outside the box ideas for your displays. Keep an eye out for some shorts, and I'll be back soon with an all-new Transformers review for your viewing pleasure. And remember, it's all such heroic nonsense in the end.
Transform!